All right, we're back once again. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from the Pop Culture Cosmos and our good friends at Inside Sports. I want to talk to you about all the good things that went on and some of the not so good things that went on when it comes to the NBA trade deadline. But I can't do that without my good friend. He is our NBA expert. It is our good friend, Anthony Barbarin. Anthony, it's always a great pleasure to talk to you, my friend.
Oh, man, it's always great to come on. I love sitting here and talking sports and talking the NBA. It's always a good time.
Always a good time. Just got finished with the Super Bowl. I think I slept through it. And we actually come back to a real fun sport, as we say now. But as you and I have talked about before, I think it's probably our favorite time of the year. It's the NBA trade deadline. I told you before we went on the show that we would not focus on the many trades that were just treated as cap filler, back into the rotation roster space, guys that were just traded to other teams just so that they will be waived just to free up some cap space or whatnot. Although I will say, if you were Nick Stauskas and Wade Baldwin IV, being traded 4 times, I believe it was 3 or 4 times within the span of 48 to 72 hours, that was just crazy for them. Didn't know where they were going to end up. But you know what? There were some other big trades that were out there. I want to discuss some of those big trades with you right now. First off, one of the big trades I think that you enjoyed the most, especially as far as from a Clippers standpoint, because you're a huge Clippers fan, and all the respect to you for that, is Tobias Harris being the integral part of a trade to Philadelphia, with Philadelphia getting Tobias Harris, who's averaging 20 points and shooting almost 45% from the three-point line. You've also got Boban Marinovic and Mike Scott, 2 quality backup players that did very well for the Clippers. They got moved over to Philadelphia in a trade that sent Landry Shamet, a very promising rookie, Wilson Chandler, Mike Muscala, who was then traded to the Lakers, and don't get me started on that one, plus 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. But I really like what the Clippers got as far as not only just freeing up a lot of space and whatnot, getting those picks, but it definitely looks like the Clippers don't want to stay in the playoff race, and they just want to go ahead and look forward to next season when they've got 2 full max slots to go ahead and sign some free agents.
Yeah, the Clippers did was very smart. And they also, by doing this and staying out of the playoff race, ensured that they would get another draft pick, because their draft pick, had they made the playoffs, was slotted to go to Boston. So would give them another first round pick this year instead of that pick going to Boston. So they secured that pick, and they essentially said, we don't want to be 8th seed, we don't want to be 7th seed. We want to compete for championships, and they know that you need big name players, big star players to do that. Tobias Harris, as good as he is not what I would say max level star. He's somebody you want to have, if you're talking championship, probably as your 3rd best player, and to pay him the kind of money that he was going to be looking for, especially coming off his best season. The Clippers didn't want to put themselves in that situation and kind of handicap themselves for next summer. The move as far as Philadelphia, I believe it's the best move. I think it's the best trade that happened during the trade deadline by far. I think it puts them not right now, but as these last 20 plus games or so gets played and they get their footing and they learn how to play together, I think they're the best team in the East at this point. I think I'm the 2nd best starting 5 in the entire NBA after Golden State. With this, you don't have to worry about Ben Simmons so much with his scoring and shooting. I think if he can learn to step back a bit in that role and do everything, which is what he's good at, he can score, he can rebound, he can pass. If he can do all of that stuff, and just nobody's pre-concerned with how many points they're getting or how many shots they're getting, I think they come out of the East.
They do have the best starting 5, and they now have a little bit of a bench, which was a big concern, as Brett Brown, the coach of the 76ers, had noted considerably over the past 3 or 4 weeks. He had noted that his bench was not up to par. Their bench, along with Boban Marinovic, Mike Scott, and also we want to go ahead and mention that in a trade, they got Jonathan Simmons to help that crew that will back up the starting 5, which, like you said, is going to be the best right now in the East that's in the offering. So yes, they do look like a team that's really going to be on the rise, and a team that's going to be just out there as far as at or near the top when it comes to the Eastern Conference, and could very well end up being in the NBA Finals real easily now that they've fortified their bench and they fortified their starting five. Tobias Harris, excellent shooter coming out there. And like you said, a very good 2, 3, or 4 option. And in this case, it looks like that's going to fit for him very well. And it will still help him look good when he goes ahead and tries to go and get that big contract out in free agency, whether he re-signs with Philadelphia or not. For the Clippers, you're right. It does make a lot of sense for them. Do they want to go ahead and get swept by Golden State? No, it doesn't really make much sense to them. And like you said, they get to keep the first round pick if they go ahead and fall out of the playoffs. Although you're resting the hopes right now on Sacramento and the Lakers to go ahead and one of those teams hop over them, which I think should happen, but you never know when it comes to right now in the NBA. So we'll have to wait and see. But yes, if they do fall out of the playoffs, they do get that first round pick back that Boston so desperately wants to keep. So that's looking good for the Clippers right there as far as for their future and for their summer, which has 2 available max slots open for them to sign free agents. Another big trade, in fact, most of the big trades came out of the East as far as for the NBA trade deadline, and one of those was Toronto getting Marc Gasol. They got Marc Gasol for 3 players coming off of Toronto. None of the 3 players were part of the serious rotation for Toronto. They were 3 decent players, but they were just players that actually could have been interchangeable, and I think was actually a good move by Toronto. It just depends on exactly how much Marc Gasol has left in the tank at 34. Is he going to be able to produce anywhere near what he was when he was the Defensive Player of the Year? I think he still can. I think his game ages well. Just take a look at his brother when he was at that age, and he was still very productive at that age. Your thoughts on the Marc Gasol trade as Marc Gasol now becomes a member of the Toronto Raptors as they traded to Memphis for Jonas Valanciunas, DeLon Wright, and CJ Miles?
I like the move. I actually think it's kind of a bit of a wait and see how his game, that grit and grind, slow it down, half-court game meshes with the way Toronto plays. However, when it comes to the playoffs, I think that's what they got him for. You're not going to get as much out in the open opportunities, sped up, running down the court opportunities. There are going to be times where you have to go one-on-one, or you're going to have to run plays in the half-court set, and everything can't be run for Kawhi. Like, you need somebody else that can go, okay, this guy can give me a bucket. And how he'll mesh in the pick-and-roll game also with Kyle Lowry, I think it's huge. He the pick and roll, the pick and pop game, especially. And he's somebody you can give the ball to. He gives you a third option in the half court setting to go, okay, we can dump it down to you now and you can get us a bucket. And he'll have games where he's vintage Marc Gasol. And also Marc Gasol is not a selfish player, so he'll be fine with games where he's not the focal point or the featured option. And I think for the most part, they're going to keep winning. So he'll be in a really, really good place mentally, and that will keep him engaged. I think he'll be fine. I think that was a great trade for Toronto.
Well, he does 2 of the things Jonas Valanciunas does not do very well, and that is shoot from the three-point line, and also is a great facilitator. He's one of the highest assist centers of all time, so he definitely knows how to pass and distribute the ball and should mesh pretty good with the Toronto offense. I think was a pretty good pickup as well. It depends how much he has still left on the defensive end. Is he still going to be able to take on Joel Embiid, Al Horford, and some of the big guys when it comes to the NBA playoffs? You've hit it right on the head as far as your thoughts on that. I think it's a good trade for Toronto, and I still think he can still do some major damage for Toronto coming up here in the near future. One of the other trades that I also want to talk about is a key acquisition for the Bucks, because you know what? When you're a team that shoots as many three-pointers as they do, what do you go and do? You go and get more three-point shooting. In the case of the Bucks, it's Nikola Mirotic, who they got from the Pelicans in a 3-player deal. Pelicans get back Jason Smith, Stanley Johnson, and a whole bunch of picks. Nikola Mirotic Don't underestimate him. He had a tremendous year last year once he was traded from the Bulls to the Pelicans and basically helped carry that team along with Jrue Holiday and also Anthony Davis into the playoffs and through that first round sweep of Portland. Your thoughts on Nikola Mirotic adding even more shooting to the great shooting Milwaukee Bucks? I know you talked about Philadelphia being at the forefront now with their trades, but I believe this trade helps Milwaukee as well and could give them a chance to surprise some people. Even though they're on top of the Eastern Conference, not as many people think they're going to be doing that well in the NBA playoffs. I think this gives them a better chance to go ahead and match up very well with some other teams in the Eastern Conference. Your thoughts on Nikola Mirotic heading to the Milwaukee Bucks?
Yeah, I think it's a good trade, especially considering if he does anything like he did when he first was moved to New Orleans, the way he played. If he plays like that, if he plays like he played early in the season for this Milwaukee team, I think it's a tremendous pickup. The shooting they need, you have to supplement some kind of shooting when your best player who has the ball in his hands most of the time, is not a great shooter. And even their second player with the ball in their hands, Eric Bledsoe, is not a great shooter. He's better than Giannis, but he's not an elite shooter. So you need somebody who can stretch the floor, somebody who can make open shots, who can give those two driving lanes. And so he's also a guy who can have games, big splash games, big scoring games. So for them, I think it makes them a little bit more versatile. Like I just said, it gives them better shooting, better spacing. I think it's a big pickup for Milwaukee as well.
Excellent analysis. I do as well. I think he can provide a little bit of oomph that even that offense just makes it much better and gives them even more spacing. I think you're right. It makes Milwaukee even tougher to defend, and it just gives more room for Giannis Antetokounmpo to just go ahead and wreak havoc. If he ever gets a consistent 3-point game, my gosh, watch out. The NBA is just the NBA will be so happy for that, and just he'll be the if he's not going to be the MVP this year, he'll be the MVP for many years to come if he ever develops that 3-point shot. Actually, a couple more trades I want to talk about. One more on the East Coast, and it concerns former number 1 draft pick Markelle Fultz. We talked a little bit about that earlier when it comes to the Philadelphia 76ers. The experiment is over. The waiting is over. The head games are over, or in this case, shoulder games is over. And it looks like Markelle Fultz is headed to Orlando. Do you think that's a good trade as far as Philadelphia sending off Markelle Fultz this soon? Do you think they were just tired and just were done with it and they just wanted to go ahead and just whatever they could get? And it looks like in this case they got Jonathan Simmons, who I said is going to be a nice backup in Philadelphia and give them some oomph off the bench, plus also a first and a second round pick. I don't think it was that bad of a haul for Markelle Fultz. I'm just not sure if you're Orlando, you're going to take a flyer on someone who has such a sketchy past couple of years as Markelle Fultz.
I like the trade. I like it on Philadelphia's part. It's time to move past the development stages of that team. It's time to compete. I think last year was that development stage when they played Boston in that series and they lost those games late. You bring in a Jimmy Butler, you bring in Tobias Harris. These guys want to win, especially a Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler's not there to develop young guys. He's there to compete. And that's what a lot of the blow up has been with him on teams. He wants to compete. And so when you bring in guys like that, it's time to compete. I think Elton Brand is at a point where he wants his team to compete for championships. And this is the time. Everybody's been making fun of it. What LeBron said, everybody's scrambling to make moves now that I'm out of the East. And it's the truth. Everybody sat pat for a lot of the years, kind of knowing and thinking they can't beat him, so we'll wait him out. He's gone now. It's time for everybody to push their chips into the middle of the table and throw their hand in. And I think for Philadelphia, it was let's get who we need on this team to compete for a championship right now. I mean, I think, honestly, if you talk about outside of Golden State, I don't think there's a better starting 5 in the league. And I honestly think they could next year, if this is still the team, and they'd be the favorites, not even just coming out of the East, but in the entire league. So I think that move for them to move past Markelle Fultz was the right move. I even thought they should have done it last year when I think they maybe could have gotten a bit more for him. But for you to get get a guy who was the first pick in the draft. He's had trouble. He hasn't really been able to get on the court. I don't think he was that bad when he was on the court, but it's time to move past him. You don't have time to develop him. You have two young stars. You have two new stars. You have shooting. You have what you need, and you get a guy like Jonathan Simmons off the bench to go with, as you said, Mike Scott, Boban Marjanovic. Gives you depth. It gives you a bench. It gives you time to compete. I think that's a great move by them. And for Orlando's been stagnant for so many years. Sometimes you have to shoot, for lack of a better term, you got to shoot your shot. So you get a guy like Markelle Fultz who still has promise and potential. He has some kinks to work out. But to me, one of the things that's in today's NBA that I see a lot that's kind of gone by the wayside and is an underrated thing in development is playing time. I see so many of these young rookies getting 15 minutes a game, 12 minutes a game, 20 minutes a game. When in the old days, you were a terrible team and you had a top 10 pick. They playing 30, 35 minutes. Nothing teaches you the game like experience. So he'll have the opportunity to get out there, get on the floor, make plays, take shots. It's hard to get comfortable shooting the ball when you're not getting shots. So that's something I think you take a flyer on this guy. You still have some of the young players on your team. You still got Aaron Gordon and Vucevic. But this guy is somebody who potentially could lead you into your future. To take a shot on a first pick in the draft 2 years ago, I don't think is a bad move by any stretch of the imagination. I think that's a risk well worth taking for Orlando.
Well, let's hope they can shoulder the load there in Orlando. Oh, the puns were flying. I will say this, that the process is definitely over, as you said, in Philadelphia, and it's time for them to really get serious about what they want to do. So it's good to see them make those moves as a win-now mode, because they are certainly in a win-now mode in Philadelphia, and it could take them all the way to the NBA Finals. One last trade I want to talk to you about, my friend, and that is in the West, because most of the big trades did occur in the East, because like you said, LeBron's out of there, so it's a free-for-all. But the West, one of the surprise teams is the Sacramento Kings. They've done very well and, in fact, are exceeding everybody's expectations, including their own general manager, Vlade Divac, who was actually on social media several months ago, had his whiteboard back there with projected wins of 29. Well, they've already matched those 29 wins as of this recording, and looks like their future's bright. In fact, they could be pushing for a playoff spot to jump ahead of the Clippers, San Antonio, or whoever. Your thoughts on them getting Harrison Barnes from the Mavericks? I'm not in love with it, because I thought whatever they needed to get as far as players are concerned and talent onto that team was something a little bit different. I just don't think that Harrison Barnes and his bloated contract is going to be something that they're going to enjoy for the next couple of years, especially if he picks up his player option. Your thoughts on Harrison Barnes going to Sacramento, and in return, Dallas, it picks up Zach Randolph, who hadn't been playing at all this year, but they might use that as a waiver or just to take his money off the books. And also Justin Jackson, a very promising young player who in many cases could be more productive than Harrison Barnes.
I actually like the move. I like what Sacramento is doing. Who would have thought they won the point guard race in that draft? De'Aaron Fox seems to be the guy to come out of that draft to be the point guard, and he's leading that team. Buddy Hield, who they traded DeMarcus Cousins for, looks to be the guy, beginning to be the guy that he was drafted to be. He's over 20 points a game. I think he's shooting close to 40% from three. You got a Marvin Bagley who, again, like as we were just saying, is not getting huge minutes, but he's productive in his minutes. Your flow of the game, the pacing of the game, the way they should play is how they're playing, and it's being very productive. I think they have a bright future. I actually like the Harrison Barnes move. For years, this team has been scrambling for a small forward, and they've not picked that guy up, and this actually gives them a guy who can put up points. Yes, he has a higher contract. I think he's about $20 million a year. However, they have a lot of young guys still on rookie deals, and I think they'll be able to float that contract comfortably until their guys begin to get in position where they have to pay the De'Aaron Foxes and the Marvin Bagleys. Buddy Hield will come up soon, but I think that he'll be the only other guy they really have to pay. And so it gives you a legitimate starting five up and down the roster. They're still young. They're still learning how to play. As much as Harrison Barnes is not an elite player, he still has playoff experience. He has championship experience. So he can bring something to the table in showing these young guys, especially if they're trying to make this push to the playoffs and, maybe even getting into the playoffs, that AFC, maybe even 7th, in that first round experience that they need. He gives you somebody who has that experience, because otherwise up and down that roster, they don't really have it. As far as Dallas in that trade, I think it's a good trade for Dallas. I love the trade Dallas made to get Porzingis. If he comes back healthy next year, you have a 1-2 punch. But right now, it's let Luka play, let him develop, let him get his experience, his time, let him develop his game and how he's going to play, and also position yourself to get a good draft pick. I mean, this is kind of top-heavy draft, but there'll be some guys in this draft who could potentially really help the Dallas Mavericks if they're a lottery team to go along with Luka and Kristaps on that team. So I think it's a good move for both teams, because if you're Sacramento, you're not trying to be in the lottery. So you don't want any more top-flight draft picks, because that doesn't help your team at this point. You need to develop the young stars that you're cultivating on that team. So the move to me is a move that makes a lot of sense.
If you're a Sacramento fan, you still got to be worried if he picks up the next year on his contract, because that does tie up a lot of cap space, and that prevents you from getting maybe a free agent that might help your team even more. I'm still trying to figure out where exactly he will fit when it comes to the Sacramento Kings scheme, but I'm sure we're going to find that out over the next couple of days. Like you said, they've got a lot of talented young players, and it's time for them to take that next step a lot faster than a lot of people had predicted. But you know what? Sacramento looks like a great young team on the rise, and it's going to be interesting to see what moves they make. Everybody's been just clowning on Vlade Divac for the past few years, and it's now starting for him to say, you know what, I'm laughing back at you, but every now and then he still does things that keep, that's people know that, hey, you know what, he may not be always there, and as far as what his thinking might be, but if you like the Harrison Barnes deal, I guess I'm going to have to grow with you on that. I'm still not 100% convinced where he fits in that lineup, but you know what? If you've got that experience in there and they're going to make a push towards a playoff run, why not? Because at this point in time, it's all house money, because no one expected them to get this far when it comes to the Sacramento Kings.
And I think when you're Sacramento, when you're some of these teams, you have to realize that you're not big money market. Attracting free agents is something that they thought they could do in the past, and I think they're realizing that's not really a viable option for them. So getting a guy like Harrison Barnes gives you somebody who can score, who can do some things. Yeah, his contract is a little high, like we said, but the possibility of them attracting a free agent, I think is a high-level free agent, is slim to none. So I think this is a team where you have to take your shots where you think you can get them and build around the stars that you have drafted. I don't think they're going to get a Kawhi, Anthony Davis. Anybody like that is not going to Sacramento. So for me, tying up their cap space is not as big of a deal as it would be if they were the Clippers or the Lakers or the Knicks or somebody like that who can attract a free agent when you're in the small money market. I think trades, draft picks are essential for those type of teams.
Like you said, it's going to be hard to go ahead and attract those marquee free agents when it comes to being the Sacramento Kings, but they are a team on the rise, and things are looking good for those fans out in Sacramento. And it's been a long time since someone could say that, so that's definitely a good thing indeed. Looking for an edge the next time you take on your favorite video game? Then check out Vitabrace High Performance Gamer Wristbands. Packed with the power of fruit seed oil, Vitabrace is clinically proven to help improve performance, giving you a better gaming experience. Head to miraclefruitoil.com and use the promo code MEDIA10 to get $10 off your Vitabrace purchase. Whether you're looking to beat the time on your latest speedrun or are fighting your way to the top on your favorite multiplayer or battle royale, Vitabrace can help you reach your gaming goals. Buy Vitabrace today at miraclefruitoil.com. That's miraclefruitoil.com. Vitabrace. win with it. Once again, it's our good friend, our resident NBA expert, Anthony Barbarin, right here. If you have a question for him at all, just go ahead and shoot us an email, popculturecosmos@yahoo.com, or just popculturecosmos or Inside Sports on our social media at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. One last thing I got to talk to you about, my friend, are the actual winners and losers of the NBA trade deadline. I know there's going to be one that's kind of obvious that a lot of people are talking about at this point in time, but if you can share with me first a couple of your winners when it comes to the NBA trade deadline.
My winners, number one is Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia wanted to get a player like that to fit with these young guys. They're a market team who can attract free agents, but a lot like Sacramento, where you're building around your young stars and Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, but you're pushing your chips to the front of into the middle of the table while you have the opportunity, while they're still on rookie deals, while they're still on young deals, and you can afford top flight players. It's time to go now to get Tobias Harris, to get a guy like that who's averaging 20 points a game, shooting almost 50% from the field, 40% from three. He's an unselfish player. He's a fit player. I think that starting five, what that gives them is tremendous in not just the Eastern Conference, but in the entire league. They are going to be a force to be reckoned with. I like what Dallas did to get Porzingis to try to build a nucleus for the future. I think that was a good move. I think it was a good, solid move for what's to come. You have a young star in Luka Doncic. For all intents and purposes, Kristaps looked to be a star. You just have to get him healthy. If he can stay healthy and he can play, you have two young stars, European guys who then help your brand as the Dallas Mavericks as a global brand. It puts you in different markets. It's also going to allow you to compete. You also put yourself in a position to get a possible future young star in the draft. I like what they did. I like what the Clippers did. I like the fact that they said, okay, let's get these draft picks. I think they still want to take their shot at Anthony Davis. They have high hopes for Kawhi. They even have high hopes for Kevin Durant. They're pushing, so to say, their own chips in the middle of the table, not for a championship, but for building a roster that can consistently compete for a championship. The Jerry West effect is very evident with the Clippers.
I'll tell you what, those were three excellent choices. I want to add another team on it as well, and that's the other side of the equation when it comes to the Kristaps Porzingis trade, and that is the New York Knicks. Not only did they pick up a former high first-round draft pick in Dennis Smith Jr., and you can just get a test run to see how he's going to do and fit in their offense, you also get two more first-round draft picks, plus you free up a ton of cap space. So now you can not only go for one, but two free agents in the summer, and then also possibly end up getting the first draft pick. The way that they're headed with the lack of success they're having this season, they could end up having the number one pick in Zion Williamson, which they could then trade off with one of those number one picks that they got from Dallas and transform that into Anthony Davis. So if you hear the rumors correctly, they could have a shot by the end of the summer having Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, and also Kevin Durant. So I think the moves by the New York Knicks, and I can't believe I'm saying this as well, the New York Knicks actually did something very good for once, and that actually works out well because Kristaps Porzingis did not want to play for the Knicks. He had just gone in there and demanded a trade. They knew he was unhappy. They knew it was something that could be potentially long-term issues with injuries and whatnot. But if you're Dallas, you got to take that chance. You got to see if he's going to have enough talent to be healthy for long-term. And for both teams, it worked out, but I really liked what it did for the New York Knicks for the future. And finally, the Knicks fans might have something to look forward to in a possible near future. I also think when it comes to winners, I agree with you on Philadelphia, but I really think, and you're going to like this, that the Clippers really won out and made some smart moves. They realized that they were going to go up against a wall. They were, eighth place, could be seventh. That still means a first-round loss to Denver or also Golden State as well. And you know what? Losing a first-round draft choice to Boston wasn't worth it to them, so they're trying hard to get out of that spot. And the moves that they made to set themselves up in the summer for two max free agent slots themselves will probably do wonders for their road because right across the corner, you still have the Lakers still having one available cap space left for them to get a max free agent. And that's going to be great for them to be able to compete, like you said, for Kawhi Leonard, Kyrie Irving, and whoever. I really like the moves that the Clippers did as well. We have the winners for the NBA trade deadline, but then there's also, unfortunately, the losers. I know obviously everybody's pointing to the Lakers as being a loser. Yes, they didn't get Anthony Davis, but they didn't have to give up the farm. The games that were played by New Orleans, and rightly so, because New Orleans, they had issues with the way everything was handled. Everything was done publicly. So you know what? They leaked everything out there that the Lakers were trying to throw at them. And if you're the Lakers trying to throw everything under the sun with up to 5, 6 players, plus 2 draft choices, plus getting back bad contracts in return, along with Anthony Davis, maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. As we look towards the summer, they still have a chance again to try for Anthony Davis, although Boston or New York looks like they'll be able to provide some things as well during the summer. Your thoughts on the NBA losers? Obviously, Lakers have to be somewhat of losers because they didn't get Anthony Davis, although they didn't have to give up the farm there. But the trade of Otto Porter Jr. to Chicago really has me scratching my head on what they're doing in Chicago.
Yeah, I agree. To me, Chicago is the loser here. Why would you take that Otto Porter contract? That's one of the worst contracts in the entire league. Took it off their hands. You put Washington in a position to, I think they were quietly, maybe not one of the winners, but they had a really solid trade deadline in Washington. They got out of that contract who nobody thought they'd be able to get from under. You got a guy in Bobby Portis who in his first game showed I can play this game, but with Chicago, it's head scratching, mind boggling. What are you doing? What do you see in Otto Porter that makes you think he's a guy worth trading for with that contract? He's not an $11 million guy. He's a $20+ million a year contract guy, and he's not a $20 million a year player. It handicaps you. And it puts you in a position to do nothing from my standpoint. So I think they are the big losers. As you were talking about in the Lakers fiasco, I honestly don't think the Lakers are the losers in this. In that scenario, I think New Orleans was the loser. I think their egos were hurt, their pride was hurt, and they didn't want to trade Anthony Davis. But I don't think you're going to get a better haul than what was offered to you by the Lakers. You were going to get Kyle Kuzma, Brandon Ingram, and you were going to get draft picks. You're going to get 2 top 5 players, 2 top 5 draft picks in the last few years. You're going to get a guy who, if he was redrafted, would have been a top 5 draft pick in Kyle Kuzma. Guys who you could also have swung for other players to build a roster. And instead, you let your pride get in the way and you want to keep a guy who's let you know he doesn't want to be there. You could have also, in that stretch, if you traded Anthony Davis, traded away Drew Holiday and got more players and more potential to build a team. Because, like I said with Sacramento, you're a small market team. You're holding on to a big name player for what he brings as far as star power, fanfare, ticket sales, but you're not going to win. So you see a guy like that or a team like that, and you're Anthony Davis, you're not going to convince him to stay there. We're in an era now, as far as players, in what I call the LeBron era, the LeBron enlightening, where players realize they have the power. It's no longer you go where you're traded. All you have to say is, I'm not going to sign there. Most teams are smart enough to realize I'm not going to trade my key assets for a free agent, big name superstar or not, that's not going to re-sign. So, yeah, it sounds good. Oh, now we have the opportunity to negotiate with Boston. But if Anthony Davis says, I'm not going to Boston, I'm not staying in Boston, why would Boston trade away their key assets, their young players, their young superstars for a guy who's not going to stay there? You would basically demolish your entire franchise if you did that. So Anthony Davis holds the power. The Lakers, for one thing, if Anthony Davis said they're one of the only teams that I'm willing to trade for, didn't have to offer what they were offering. And for you to get them to offer that much when they were essentially in the driver's seat and you not take that opportunity because of pride, to me, makes no sense. you could have gotten a litany of young players, young asset, young talent, and built your franchise from that. And instead, you held on to a player who doesn't want to be there, which in turns caused you to hold on to other players that shouldn't be there once he's gone. And it didn't make a lot of sense.
Well, I'll say this as someone who is, and you know how much of a Lakers fan I am,
Right.
but that crew right there that they were offering hasn't gotten the Lakers too far. I think it's also not the best. It's difficult to say because that crew, got you 35 wins last year, and during the time that LeBron was out, didn't get you a whole lot, and they were under 500 during the time that LeBron was out. So when they're combined together, they didn't win enough games as a whole to maybe make it attractive enough for New Orleans to say, I got to have these players. And I think that's also on the Lakers for not developing those players to the point where they can go ahead and stand out on their own without LeBron. And I think that was the key. I think of the team, we're in the playoff race, like at a 5 or 6 seed right now, and they had offered that package. I think New Orleans probably would have been more attracted to it per se. But when you went on such a losing streak after LeBron got injured, I think that's where the problems start as far as offering so much of that. But when you're offering up to 2, possibly even 4 first-round draft picks along with those young players, that makes no sense for me as far as not trying to go ahead and take up on that offer, especially if LA is taking back bad contracts along with Anthony Davis. So, you know what? I know that people are perceiving the Lakers as a loser, and this whole thing was a fiasco and very petty on as far as New Orleans is concerned. But you know what? New Orleans was the jilted team here by Anthony Davis, so they had every right to act in a vengeful manner, and I think they did so. It was very unfortunate to see how it all played out. And yes, it's going to be interesting this summer when New York and Boston can offer as much, for the most part, as much as far as an attractive offer for Anthony Davis. It's just to see if Anthony Davis wants to go ahead and commit to Boston, New York, or if finally a trade goes through and he does end up in Los Angeles. We'll have to wait and see, but it's going to be a very interesting summer for Los Angeles, Boston, New York, so many other teams, and also Anthony Davis as well. Well, my friend, it's always great to talk to you about the NBA and the NBA trading deadline. It was a very good trade deadline. I just enjoyed just seeing all those transactions flying around. Again, if you have any questions for Anthony Barbarin, just send us an email, popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. Also as well, Inside Sports and Pop Culture Cosmos on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You know what? It's getting closer, my friend. About 25, 27 games left before the NBA playoffs. You know I'm going to ask you to come back on the show beforehand to give us a playoff preview as we break down both sides of the brackets when it comes to the Eastern and Western Conference. I'm not going to ask you to go ahead and break down the NBA All-Star Draft. No, I don't want you to do that. That was pretty obvious by LeBron selecting all the free agents that are. Right. That was pretty slick on his part. I mean, don't underestimate LeBron on what he's thinking. So that's always a good thing when you got that going on there. But my friend, it's always great to have you on the show. Any last thoughts on the way out?
No, we'll talk when the playoffs come. We'll get into that. I am interested in seeing how the last 20 or so games plays out. I think it can be. I think it's going to be a little bit exciting. The playoffs, again, I don't see anybody beating Golden State, but the road up into the playoffs should be interesting. We'll see how your Lakers do with that now that LeBron's back. New Orleans won't make. I mean, the Pelicans won't make it. So some of these other teams, see how these young kids grow in this stretch, and some of these young players, and we'll possibly get a glimpse of, how the future of the league is looking and who can step up and become those young stars. So this will be interesting.
It will be indeed. My friend, it's always great to have you on the show. Always great to have you part of the Pop Culture Cosmos and also right here on Inside Sports as well.